on to your deep dive into the sometimes crazy world of mobile app development. We're going on a bit of a journey today, a journey through time. Starting way back in the early 2000s, can you imagine trying to build an app back then? Talk about a headache. You wanted to understand just how we got from those early days to the apps that we use today so effortlessly. And it's pretty interesting that your source material even mentions some pretty big names like Facebook and Google. Clearly, they've had a huge influence on the whole thing.
Well, what's really fascinating is that their innovations didn't just happen out of nowhere. The entire mobile landscape was shifting. It was being driven by all these developers who were grappling with limitations and constantly searching for better solutions.
Okay, so let's unpack all of this. We'll start with the era of native apps, building directly for iOS or Android. What was that like?
Okay, so imagine this. You're a developer and you have this amazing app idea. But in order to reach both iPhone and Android users, you're essentially building two completely separate apps. Right? One for Apple devices painstakingly coded in Objective-C, and then another one entirely for Android using Java. Time-consuming doesn't even begin to describe it. Not to mention the cost of maintaining those two separate code bases.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. So native apps offered the best performance, but the development process sounds like a logistical nightmare. Did developers at the time realize that this approach wasn't going to last?
Oh yeah. The need for a more streamlined approach was definitely felt across the industry. And that's when hybrid apps entered the scene. They promised this write once, run anywhere. Utopia frameworks like PhoneGap and Ionic emerged. Leveraging the familiar trio of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, a lot of developers already had those skills, so the appeal was undeniable.
It does sound pretty appealing, I have to admit. Was there a catch?
Well, there was a significant hurdle, and that was performance. Hybrid apps relied on web views. Essentially, these mini browsers running within the app. Think of it like viewing a website through a tiny window inside an app. This approach often resulted in performance bottlenecks. Web views just couldn't match the speed and responsiveness of native apps, leading to those frustrating, laggy experiences.
Right, but wasn't there a period where the convenience of hybrid apps, that ability to code once and reach both platforms, seemed to outweigh the performance concerns for some users and developers?
Absolutely. For many, especially in those early days of hybrid development, the speed of development and the cost savings were compelling enough to just accept those performance trade-offs. However, as user expectations for app quality continued to rise, the limitations of web views became increasingly apparent. Users wanted those smooth and responsive experiences.
So it sounds like a classic dilemma, balancing that development efficiency with the user experience.
Exactly. And that's where React Native comes in Facebook's attempt to solve this very dilemma.
React Native.
Yeah.
Yeah, the name rings a bell. It made quite a splash when it was first launched back in 2015. It sounds like React Native really tried to bridge the gap between ease of development and performance. How did they manage to pull that off?
Well, React Native took a fundamentally different approach compared to those earlier hybrid frameworks. Instead of relying on those web views, it interacts directly with native APIs. This means it's not limited by the performance constraints of a web view and can really tap into the full power of the device.
So it's still using a single code base, but it's talking directly to the native components of the phone. That's pretty clever.
Exactly. This direct communication is the key to achieving that smooth, native-like feel that users have come to expect. And then there's the hot reloading feature, which was a total game changer for developers.
Hot reloading. Tell me more. I'm all ears.
Okay, imagine this. You're coding away, right? And you make a change. With hot reloading, you actually see the result of that change instantly in the app without having to restart the entire thing. It's like magic.
Wow. That sounds like it would really speed up development time significantly. No more waiting around for the app to rebuild after every tiny little tweak.
Exactly. It allowed for a much more iterative and efficient development process, which developers absolutely loved. React Native really seemed to have cracked the code, offering the best of both worlds. A single code base with near-native performance. But as with any technology, it wasn't without its challenges.
There's always a catch, isn't there? Nothing's perfect, I suppose. So even React Native has its limitations. What are some of the challenges that developers might face with this framework?
Well, while React Native excels in many areas, certain types of apps might just push its boundaries.
Yeah.
For instance, if you're building an app with heavy graphics or complex animations, like a graphically intensive game, you might still encounter performance bottlenecks.
So for those really resource-intensive applications, native development might still be the better option.
Yes. And another factor to consider is React Native's dependence on third-party libraries. While these libraries can be incredibly useful, they also introduce a level of uncertainty, Some work flawlessly while others can be buggy or become outdated.
So there's a little bit of a gamble involved. Developer really has to weigh the convenience of using a library against the potential for problems down the road.
Precisely. Developers need to choose libraries carefully and stay updated on any changes or issues that might arise.
It sounds like even with a revolutionary framework like React Native, there's no escaping the need for careful planning and consideration in mobile app development.
Absolutely. Each project really comes with its own unique set of requirements and constraints, and choosing the right approach is crucial for success.
So React Native marked a significant leap forward, but it definitely wasn't the final word in mobile app development. What came next?
Well, the mobile app development landscape, it's constantly evolving.
Mm.
It's an exciting time to be following the industry with all these promising contenders emerging.
It sounds like the competition is really heating up. So what are some of the key players that are vying for a spot in the mobile development arena?
One of the rising stars is Flutter. It was developed by Google, and from your reading, it seems like it's gaining a reputation for its performance, especially with complex UIs. It uses a language called Dart, which is specifically designed for building those beautiful and responsive user interfaces.
Okay, Flutter and Dart. So what makes Flutter's architecture so well suited for performance? What sets it apart?
Flutter actually takes a unique approach by compiling its code directly into native machine code. So this eliminates the need for a bridge between the app's code and the device's native components, which results in a much faster and smoother user experience.
So it's like Flutter is speaking the device's native language rather than going through a translator.
That's a great analogy. And this direct communication, it translates into apps that feel incredibly fluid and responsive, even with really intricate animations and transitions.
From what I've read, Flutter seems to be gaining a lot of traction, particularly for apps that prioritize visual appeal and a seamless user experience. Are there any other innovations out there that are shaking things up in the mobile development world?
Another one to keep an eye on is Kotlin Multiplatform. It's also developed by Google, and this framework really takes aim at the holy grail of code sharing, allowing developers to write code once and then use it across multiple platforms, including Android and iOS.
Wait a minute, isn't that what React Native aims to do as well? What makes Kotlin multi-platform different?
Well, while both frameworks share the goal of code reusability, Kotlin Multiplatform takes a slightly different approach. You see, it allows for sharing that core logic and business rules across platforms, while still giving developers the flexibility to create platform-specific user interfaces if they need to.
So it's about finding a balance between maximizing code sharing and maintaining that ability to tailor the user interface to each platform's unique design conventions.
Yes, exactly. Kotlin Multiplatform recognizes that sometimes you want to leverage those specific UI elements and patterns that users are accustomed to on each platform to really provide a truly native-like experience.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like Kotlin Multiplatform offers a really pragmatic approach to code sharing, recognizing that a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't always work.
Yes, and this approach can be particularly beneficial for teams that are working on large, complex apps, where maintaining multiple code bases can become a real headache.
Okay, so we've got Flutter, which is focused on performance, and then we have Kotlin Multiplatform, which is offering a more nuanced approach to code sharing. What other trends should we have on our radar?
We can't forget about the rise of progressive web apps, or PWAs for short. These are web applications that are designed to feel and function like native apps, even though they run directly in your web browser.
So instead of downloading an app from an app store, you can just access it directly through your browser. What's the magic behind that?
PWAs leverage a few key technologies to provide that near-native experience. They use service workers, which are scripts that run in the background to enable features like offline access and push notifications. They also utilize a web app manifest, which is a file that provides information about the app, like its name, its icon, and the start URL to the browser.
So it's like the browser is treating these web apps as first-class citizens, giving them the ability to behave more like their native counterparts.
Exactly. And this shift has some significant implications. PWAs eliminate the need for users to download and install anything, making them incredibly accessible. They're also super easy for developers to update since they're essentially just websites.
It sounds like PWAs are challenging the very notion of what it means to be a mobile app, blurring the lines between the web and the native app experience.
That's a great way to put it. And as web technologies continue to evolve, we can expect PWAs to become even more sophisticated and even more capable.
Okay, so we've covered Flutter, Kotlin Multiplatform, and PWAs. It sounds like the landscape of mobile app development is becoming increasingly diverse. With each approach offering its own unique strengths and trade-offs, what other innovations are shaping the future of mobile app development?
Now, this is where things get really interesting. Imagine AI and machine learning woven into the very fabric of mobile apps. That's where things are headed.
AI and machine learning in mobile apps. That sounds pretty transformative. How would these technologies even be used? What kind of
suggest adjustments to your routine, or even connect you with relevant healthcare professionals when needed.
A truly personalized health companion that goes beyond just collecting data and actually helps you.
Or think about the potential in education. Imagine interactive learning apps that adapt to your learning style, identify your strengths and weaknesses, and provide real-time feedback. The possibilities are truly endless. We're just scratching the surface of what mobile technology can achieve when we combine it with the power of AI and machine learning.
It really is mind-boggling to think about how far we've come, from those early native apps to this incredible future where apps are not only functional but also intelligent and deeply personalized. But what are some of the challenges that come with integrating these powerful technologies into mobile apps?
You're right. We've talked about the exciting advantages, but it's important to acknowledge the potential challenges as well. One of the key considerations is security. As we embrace these new technologies, we're dealing with more data, more complex systems, and potentially more vulnerabilities.
That makes sense. Security is paramount, especially when we're talking about apps that handle sensitive personal information like health data or financial transactions. How can developers ensure the security of these increasingly sophisticated apps?
Security needs to be a top priority throughout the entire development lifecycle. Developers need to implement robust authentication and authorization mechanisms, encrypt sensitive data both in transit and at rest, and stay updated on the latest security best practices and emerging threats.
It sounds like a constant game of cat and mouse as developers work to stay one step ahead of those potential attackers.
Absolutely. And then there's the challenge of just keeping up with the rapid pace of change in this field. You know, new frameworks, new tools, new technologies are emerging all the time.
So developers really need to be lifelong learners, constantly adapting and expanding their skill sets to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. It's an exciting but demanding field to be in.
But the rewards can be huge, right? I mean, think about the impact that these apps have on our lives. They connect us, they entertain us, and they make our lives easier in countless ways.
You're absolutely right. The mobile app industry is a powerful force, and developers are really at the forefront of shaping our digital future.
So we've explored this incredible evolution of mobile app development. From those early native apps to the rise of hybrid frameworks like React Native, the emergence of contenders like Flutter and Kotlin Multiplatform, the disruption of PWAs, and the transformative potential of AI and machine learning. It's been quite a journey. It really is amazing to see just how far we've come in such a short time. You know, we've covered the history, we've talked about the challenges, and all those exciting possibilities that are on the horizon. But what does it all mean for the everyday user? What kind of apps will we actually be interacting with in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If we take all of these trends and kind of extrapolate them into the future, I think we can start to paint a pretty exciting picture.
Well, I'm all for a little bit of future casting. What do you see happening?
I think the biggest shift that we're going to see is towards this idea of hyper-personalization. You know, imagine apps that truly understand your individual needs and preferences. Apps that can actually learn from your behavior and anticipate what you need before you even ask.
That sounds pretty incredible. But how would that work in practice? Can you give me an example?
Sure, let's take travel planning, for instance. Imagine an app that not only helps you book your flights and your hotels, but also learns your travel style. You know, your preferred airlines, your dietary restrictions, even your packing habits. And then based on all of that information, it could curate these personalized itineraries, suggest activities you might enjoy, and even alert you to any potential travel disruptions based on real-time data.
So it's like having a super efficient travel agent who knows you inside and out, constantly working behind the scenes to make your trip as smooth and enjoyable as possible.
Exactly. And this level of personalization could extend to almost every aspect of our digital lives. From shopping apps that curate recommendations based on your style and budget, to entertainment apps that suggest movies and shows that you'll actually love.
It sounds like AI and machine learning will be the driving forces behind this hyper-personalized future. Are there any other trends that you think will shape the apps of tomorrow?
I think we're also going to see a blurring of the lines between the physical and digital worlds.
Yeah.
You know, augmented reality and virtual reality are already starting to make their way into mobile apps, and I think we're only going to see much more of this in the future.
Yeah, AR and VR are certainly getting a lot of buzz these days. How do you see these technologies actually being integrated into mobile apps?
Imagine shopping for furniture and being able to use your phone's camera to see how a virtual sofa would actually look in your living room before you buy it. Or taking a virtual tour of a museum or a historical site from the comfort of your own home. The possibilities are vast.
Those are some pretty compelling examples. It sounds like these technologies have the potential to really transform how we interact with the world around us.
Absolutely. And I think we'll also see a greater emphasis on accessibility and inclusivity in app design. As the world becomes increasingly digital, it's crucial that everyone, regardless of their abilities or disabilities, can fully participate in the digital landscape.
That's a really important point. So what kind of design considerations would need to be made to ensure that apps are truly accessible to everyone?
Developers are going to need to think carefully about things like color contrast, font sizes, screen reader compatibility, and alternative input methods. The goal is to create apps that are usable and enjoyable for people with a wide range of abilities and needs.
It sounds like the future of mobile app development isn't just about building those cool new features and technologies, but also about ensuring that these innovations are accessible to everyone.
That's exactly right. It's about creating a more inclusive and equitable digital world where everyone can benefit from the power of mobile technology.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of mobile app development, it's clear that this industry is constantly evolving, driven by both technological advancements and a desire to create apps that are more powerful, more personalized, and more accessible. It's been a fascinating journey exploring this landscape with you.
The pleasure was all mine. I always enjoyed these conversations about the future of mobile technology. It's such a dynamic and innovative field.
And before we sign off, I'd like to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. With all of these incredible possibilities on the horizon, what kind of apps do you want to see in the future? What problems do you wish an app could solve? Let your imagination run wild, and who knows, maybe your idea will inspire the next generation of groundbreaking apps.
That's a great way to end our conversation. Remember, the future of mobile is in your hands. Keep exploring, keep innovating, and let's see what incredible things we can create together.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those app ideas flowing.